We had a great start, and we're going to build on that inspiration with more strategic framing before we dive into more pragmatic aspects, right? And Ken, I'm excited about the composition of our plenary panel. We've been talking about how this is a team game, and this is, collaboration is the mantra for success. Convergence is the only thing that's going to get us there. And so we've got this panel reflect that. So without holding us from the fun conversations, I'm going to request our esteemed speakers of the plenary panel to please join me up here. Foremost, Prof. Emile, Director General, Rwanda FDA. Prof, may I please request you to come up on stage? Now have, the money is important to get it done, and so Zeynep Kantur, Head of Global Health Sector, IFC. We need a lot of money to get this done, so we also have the European Investment Bank. So could I request Edward Claessen, Head of EIB's Global Regional Representation, East Africa, to join us. And without the private sector, this boat ain't sailing. And somebody who's gotten it done has the experience of both the opportunities, but also the challenges. So I'm going to request Mugisha Bai, CEO of TKMD Medical, to also join us up here. And we've been talking about not just the basics, but pushing the boundaries on what we do. So there comes the biologicals, monoclonal antibodies, next generation solutions, which feel like a distant reality, but are going to be true in terms of affordable access in the near term, regionally produced, given innovators like Menghis. So Menghis, please, CEO, President, and co-founder of Usawa. Menghis did have a small fall earlier this week. He still made the effort to climb up 2 steps to join us on stage, so appreciate that, Menghis. The entrepreneurial spirit can't be broken. Okay, so we're going to have a free-ranging conversation. I think expecting us to develop solutions is a little far-fetched. But what gets us towards solutions is a practical reflection of the challenges where we've gotten and what could get us further in this goal. And that's the goal we're going to focus on in this conversation, one of a resilient pharma, biotech, health product manufacturing value chain in Africa. So I'm going to first, I think, to frame the conversation, refresh for our memories that we've been hearing multiple times that the collective continental pharma opportunity in terms of market size is anywhere between $25 to $30 billion. Can we translate that to competitive value chains at scale? Can we address structural constraints of the past which have resulted in lack of industry unlocking this opportunity and this potential to have a regional opportunity? And can Africa not just manufacture for Africa, but develop, innovate, discover for Africa and the world, and manufacture for the world and the continent would be, again, towards the end, great to reflect on. But to start with the basics, I think we were reminded this morning that regulatory capacity is the foundation of accomplishing this goal. So I'm going to request Prof. Emile to get us started here on this panel. And I've said this earlier today as well, despite being one of the youngest NRAs on the continent, you've driven Rwanda FDA, you've led Rwanda FDA to ML3. You briefly referred to that in the morning in your address. But it'll be interesting, I think, for industry to also hear your reflection on what it means for private sector. Why does this matter as we're thinking about the sector scaling up? Why does this matter that you have, in such a resolute way, led Rwanda FDA to ML3. Why does it, I mean, there are voices in all directions, right? I mean, we hear people say, why ML3? We were doing okay. Yes, we were doing okay, but there's a different set of opportunities that get unlocked with a regulatory framework at a different level. So, Prof, I'm turning to you here to frame in the context of private sector development, reflect on this journey of taking Rwanda FDA to ML3 and why this matters for private sector development as a goal.
Thank you very much. Once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your question, Pushpa. I won't go back and speak about what it requires to achieve maturity level 1, 2, and 3. I will just indicate what WHO maturity level 3 means. Once you've achieved maturity level 3, because you go through a journey and you evaluate it through different sessions and you benchmarked against international standards. And once you meet all the requirements, you certified as having achieved maturity level 3, indicating that you adhere to, you've established a regulatory system that is robust, stable, and well-functioning. That is what it means, and it brings international recognition to the country and to the agency that is regulating medical products in the country. It means that the country has deployed efforts to implement a robust and well-functioning regulatory system. What does it mean to manufacturers of pharmaceutical products, investors, and the private sector? If you are regulated by a regulatory agency, a regulatory body that has achieved international standards at maturity level 3, you also adhere to the same standards, international standards, which actually brings to you as a company, a manufacturer, or a manufacturing facility regulated by ML3 regulatory body, you also adhere to the same standard. And it brings international recognition to your company and to the products that you produce and issue to the market. Another thing is that once you are regulated by an ML3 regulatory body, and because you adhere to international standards, you also operate with minimized regulatory risk as a company, which brings some benefits to the company itself. Another benefit to the private sector is that the credibility of the company itself is credible. And this can allow your products to enter regional and continental markets and even the global market because you adhere to international quality and safety standards. Another benefit, which is actually the biggest, is that the products manufactured and regulated by a ML3 regulatory body are eligible for WHO pre-qualification, which allow your products to enter the international supply chain. In the morning, I was talking about one of the manufacturing facilities operating here in Rwanda, TKMD. We achieved the maturity level 3 in December 2024, and TKMD, which has already started to operate, have seen their product being pre-qualified. The products they produce from Rwanda, the AD syringes, they are already pre-qualified by the WHO, and they have already entered the international supply chain. I'm sure he's going to be talking about, and this is one of the benefits that came from having achieved maturity level 3. Of course, the sector itself developed from operating from a country that has achieved maturity level 3 because investors are always attracted to work in a country that has put in place a regulatory body that is robust, a regulatory framework that is robust. Because if you operate in a country that implements such system. It prevents you from unfair competition. So it's one of the tools that can incentivize investors to come and invest in your country. There is another benefit that I want to talk about, which is about collaboration and establishing regulatory partnerships. Because when you are a maturity level 3 country, you enter into regulatory partnerships with other countries, which open the room for implementing modern regulatory pathways. Those people who are familiar with these knows what we call reliance and mutual recognition, which can facilitate easy approval of the products from the countries collaborating with you. It also opens the market because once you have signed this regulatory partnership, because you are at that level, your country are able to be exported in the countries you collaborate with. So it increases the market and benefit the private sector and lead to the development of the sector itself. These are a few things which I can share with you on this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And I recollect even 3 years ago when you were already envisioning bilateral partnerships. I think that focus on using regulations as expanding market access is so critical, because otherwise that $20 to $30 billion market we're talking about is theoretical, and it's not really one industry can actualize. So thank you for that framing. Zeynep, I'll turn to you. Again, had the privilege to co-conspirate with IFC along the way over the last 4 years. You've been an ardent champion of the regional value chain development. So could you frame for the audience what your investment priorities are in the sector and what's your strategy now?
Does it work? It does work. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So IFC has been investing in the pharmaceutical sectors for almost 4 decades. In fact, yesterday I was talking about one of our first clients, Hikma. We've just celebrated our 40th anniversary with them. And we had the privilege of going through their journey from a small Jordanian company into a multinational company. The reason I mention that is that over the past, again, 3-4 decades, as we've been investing in this sector, we have seen domestic industries being built in different regions, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa as well. And what that is basically has led to, now we have invested around $6 billion in this industry, and mainly generics manufacturers, but also distribution companies and retail companies. So what drives our business strategy is to basically creating these regional champions that actually play a very important role in the pharmaceutical industry. They are the recipients of tech transfer, like even COVID-19 vaccines. They were filled and finished by some of these companies during the pandemic. They're the companies who can scale up very quickly to respond to the health emergencies. And they're also the companies who are acquiring assets and brands that are being sold by multinationals that have strategic decisions to not have local presence in these companies, so that they enable access to these products, but also continued jobs for the people. So creation of those regional champions have been at the heart of our strategy. But in some cases, we need to build the industry from scratch, which requires a lot more than financing, which is why we've been trying to expand our support for the sector beyond financing with, as you know, pre-financing, what we call upstream support, by partnering with institutions like EIB, bringing our different tools together, because we've been talking about how great it is. We have now 9 regulators having achieved maturity level 3 in Africa. A lot of companies are struggling to make the investments to get up to the standards that are required. So there are 3 things that we're very focused on in our strategy and investment decisions. Is quality is something that we cannot move away from. working with companies who can develop a portfolio of products, because that gives the strong backbone to, again, scale up and down during high demand times, but also bring the diversification. And also they can balance their commercial viability with access and affordability of their products. Finally, I already talked about the commercial viability, which has been a very important focus for us. Now, we also try to facilitate South-South investments, and as a global development finance institution, that has been a main competence for us. I mean, we'd like to see more companies to also come and invest in Africa, and that's already happening. I think China is leading the way, but we hope to see a lot more companies. And what we try to do is to also work with these companies to co-create projects instead of waiting for the moment when they're perfectly financeable. So that's another part of our strategy. The final thing that I'm going to mention is, I mean, of course, we're also trying to grow our portfolio into vaccines and biologics and more complex products. It has been more of a generic story, and also expanding our portfolio in the medtech, medical supplies business. We're quite cognizant of the fact that there's a huge API dependence on one market, really, or 2, 3, and there's a reason for that. So I don't want to sound naive, but we've been looking into, and I'm sure Edward will talk about that as well. What are those tipping points of trying to geographically diversify API production and make API supply more sustainable, not only during emergencies, but it's a bottleneck even during peacetime. So we've been working with some of the companies here in Africa included, looking at the feasibility of API manufacturing. Some niche products are coming across, and also potentially tech transfer from different partners. So that's pretty much what our strategy looks like today. Thank you.
Thanks, Zeynep. That breadth is encouraging, and the combination of FDI that supports sector maturation with nurturing on continent companies to scale and viability. Thank you. Edward, I'll turn to you. EIB has also been a champion of the sector, and we're glad to have, which is why both the voices here. You've championed availability of blended finance in several instances. It is a focus and it is a need. It's a complex sector with a long gestation period, multiple layers of risk, product, regulations, manufacturing, commercial. So from your investment approach, what's your commitment to the sector, and what types of financing are you making available given this sector's context?
Yes, thank you very much, Pushpa, for the question, and thanks for having me on the panel. So the European Investment Bank has been investing also in the healthcare sector for a very long time. I'm not sure we can compete with the IFC on an international scale, but I looked up the figures for last year, and we invested 3 billion euros into the healthcare sector. Of course, this is still predominantly European money. And looking at what type of, let's say, what type of financing we offer, we see that venture debt is kind of a useful financing tool for this sector. And why is that? Because a traditional loan might not be so suitable if you make an investment now and only in 5 or 7 years' time do you see the fruit of your, let's say, either your manufacturing facility or your product development. So it's a high-risk sector everywhere. It's even more high risk, we believe, in Africa, or it's considered to be more of a high risk. I'm not sure I always agree with that, but why is it more high risk? In Africa, the sector is a little bit more nascent. It's slightly less mature than in some other parts of the world, meaning a lot of the companies are still in a startup phase or at a young stage. And so they don't have the financial muscle yet to maybe finance it all themselves. So, and given that a traditional loan is not the right product, they need equity or they need grants to grow. Unfortunately, equity and grants are in short supply, not only in Africa, but all over the world. So we've come up with a new initiative. My colleague Elise Hartman from the European delegation already mentioned it. and it's called the Human Development Accelerator, HDX. And this is an initiative from us, the European Investment Bank, together with the European Commission and the Gates Foundation. And it is meant to support let's say, local manufacturing capabilities in sub-Saharan Africa. It's quite a substantial initiative. It's 750 million euros. And the way it works is that we would provide a loan to a project, if it meets the criteria that we have set. The Commission would fully guarantee the loan, and the Gates Foundation comes in with all their expertise, their know-how, their networks, to really combine, let's say, the best of the three partners, and to make sure, or to try and make sure, that the projects we support have a high chance of being successful. I think the other, let's say, exciting feature of the product is that we can really tailor each and every venture debt loan to its needs. As I said earlier, a standard loan is probably not the right way to go about it. So the way we provide the financing is we have long tenors, up to 10, 12 years, long grace periods, because a company can possibly not pay back immediately, so we need to give them time to before they have to pay us back. It is still a loan, but it's very much, it's almost like we're trying to mimic equity, but without taking ownership. So this should also be an upside for the company taking the venture debt loan. And finally, and that's a very attractive feature that maybe we can come back to later, we can subordinate ourselves as EIB in the transaction. And this subordination is hopefully attractive for other investors, either commercial investors or maybe other DFIs, to say, oh, this project is even, it's a bit de-risked already, so let's come in and let's co-finance together with the EIB and the European Commission and the Gates Foundation this project. So, yeah, for us, I would say venture debt is a blended finance in a way that we combine it with the European Commission, is hopefully a good way forward to grow the sector.
Sounds like an equity-like instrument. Interesting. Thanks, Edward. I think that's news to several stakeholders in the room, and I think both the hunger for an IFC-style upstream engagement to shape projects, but also, blended finance structures which are ingenious and creative and equity-like in some ways is also so critical. So very glad to have that being a reality today. Mugisha, I'll turn to you. We've been chatting about your journey and how you're already commercial, right? And you're manufacturing syringes right here in Rwanda. You've got a US FDA, EU-approved WHO PQ site here. Yes, you had an enabling ecosystem, but what was the motivation and what's the journey been like till now?
It's a long journey.
I think it would be great to reflect on what made you decide to do this. So why did you decide to come set up in Africa? For the most part, I think several of us in the room first heard of you as, hey, a syringe company is already set up in Rwanda, right? So you're very famous because several of us have heard that sentence of a syringe company is already set up in Rwanda, and guess what? They're commercial. So what motivated you to do it? Because I think several of us are putting thought to how do we incentivize industry to come set up in Africa and be part of this journey to build a value chain. So what motivated you? I mean, do you find, was it a markets pull? Was it a demand from stakeholders you work with? What was the motivation to come?
Actually, we decided to invest in Africa in 2018, a long time ago. At the beginning time, why we want to stay here is from the invitation from our long-term customer. They give this advice to invest, at that time, invest in Uganda. So why we decide to invest in Rwanda is because after that we do a lot of investigation for the business environment for the EAC countries. When I see Rwanda, the beautiful city, the wonderful business environment, the kind of people, kind of government, we decided to invest in Africa.
Excellent. Excellent. And within Africa, you've now been able to develop global quality assurance in the current facility? Could you also reflect on the journey of getting US FDA and EMA approvals for your site?
Yes, actually, we have a great technology team in China. First, we spent a long time training. We sent many engineers from China to Rwanda here to training the local workers. After our training, we start to do the application of like PQ, ISO, US FDA, and also CE MDR, and we will get MedSAP in 2 months. So this is a long journey, and actually it's a risk because medical company, we are a pioneer. Before we started, we are not sure we can get this certificate. But if we can't get this certificate, we are not to sell. Rwanda have some limited to do medical device because it's a small country. We can't rely on the local market. We have to go outside. So that's, we have confidence because our mother company, our chairman is here, they give us a lot of technology support for this journey. And we have more than 50 technology people in China work together with Rwanda technical team to get this certification.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's a great example of not just manufacturing in Africa for Africa, but creating the kind of capacity that serves the world as a broader distributed manufacturing network you've built. Thank you for being that pioneer and creating that template. Menghis, I'll turn to you. Here, I think you're also pioneering in your own right by, again, picking what is not common. You've picked biologicals, monoclonal antibodies. What's been your progress so far, and what's been the journey? It is easy to go after areas where there are mature markets. That's not true in your case. And it's also not true when you don't have the skills, you don't have the regulations, it's never been done before, and you start doing it for the first time. So what's been your experience and what's been the progress so far?
So thank you. First of all, thank you really for the invitation. Before I answer directly your question, I just want to share some reflection. Exactly a year ago, we were here. My co-founder and I were at the same conference, but at the conference center. And at that time, basically, Usawa was really more a concept. We had slides, we had ideas. Yeah, fast forward 1 year later, not only really we have a product, a monoclonal antibody, anti-VEGF, that has been approved in Rwanda, but we also already have an office, a place in special economic zone, and we are in the process really of setting up our first monoclonal antibody manufacturing facility in Rwanda. All of this, will not really have happened really if it wasn't really for the amazing collaboration of all stakeholders within the Rwanda government. So I want to thank really the Rwanda government and all the entities really for all their support. This will not have happened anywhere else, so we are pleased to be here. In terms of vision, in the late 1990s, I had the pleasure really of, the honor really of being at Genentech, working on several monoclonal antibodies that have been saving lives, whether breast cancer or colorectal cancer, TNK, etc. So nowadays, if you are anywhere in the world, anywhere in the Western world, if you have a heart attack or a stroke, if you get really into the emergency room, within 4 hours, you get a TNK, and your chance of survival really from MI or stroke is in the high 90-something%. If you have breast cancer and you are HER2 positive, if you are in the West, your 5-year survival is in the 95%. Same patient, same characteristic, you are in Africa, is 5%. If you have lymphoma, if you are in the West, you have, CD20 positive, you get really rituximab, your survival again is really above 90%. And I can go on and on. Avastin, the same thing. If you have diabetic macular edema, if you are on anti-VEGF, you are not going to get blind. If you do get blind. So look at the inequity. So we are in the West, all of us get the best treatment really possible. We get what's called really standard of care. You go in any clinic, that's what you get, standard of care. So why am I here? Why did we start Bai-Usawa? It's exactly really to change that. We want really African patients to get access to novel therapeutic agents so that they can get standard of care. And this is really our why. And we are pleased really to do it here in Rwanda because it's allowing us really to fast track really all activities and to make it really happen. But obviously this cannot be happen really with one organization. So we are looking for various ways to partner with various groups really to make it work. So a few years from now, our vision is to make really sure that your location, where you are born or where you are, doesn't really dictate really whether you are alive or dead.
Thank you, Menghis. I mean, I recall our meeting last year at the previous EAPB, and you're referring to slides and a concept. What I remember seeing was vision, so I'm glad we got where we got. Excellent. So, Prof, I'm coming back to you. We just had Menghis talk about getting approval by Rwanda FDA for a monoclonal antibody. As I think about, this is a continental question we're answering, right, on how do we nurture regional value chains, sustainable access embedded in manufacturing capacity. We need multiple NRAs to be able to do approvals of biologicals, biosimilar pathways, established AMTPs, cell and gene therapy. If we can bring, there's no reason it can't be done in an affordable way, and it's part of the vision, right? So yes, we're solving for where there are mature markets, but we're also pushing the envelope on possibilities that are future-oriented and that embody vision at a different level. You have made that happen here for Bai-Usawa. So how do we think of the future in terms of this regulatory enablement for complex biological products, biosimilar pathways being true, in any country in Africa? So if industry is going to set up in Africa, what would be your message to them as a regulator on the way forward on ensuring robust regulatory environment for complex products, including biosimilars and AMTPs?
We are talking about the challenge to provide oversight of new products, complex ones, and innovative products. Maybe let me explain why this seems to be an issue. Actually, it's an issue because of what we've been talking since this morning. It has been an issue because of the reason why we are holding this conference here. Is because on the African continent, as I said this morning, we are importing more than 70% of the products. And most of these products were actually off-patent products, generic products. These are what we call common medicines, common drugs that were imported to be used here in Africa. And regulatory bodies in Africa have been building their skills and capacities to regulate these common drugs that were imported, off-patent products and generic ones. Without a local production, we can't have new products, innovative products on the continent, and even complex ones, like biological products. This is the reason why I can't say that there was no capacity to regulate these products, but we have limited capacities to regulate these products on the continent, on the African continent. Now, countries like Rwanda are empowering local production. And what we want to do in Rwanda, of course, we can produce generic products or patent products, but we aim at producing innovative products, actually covering the entire life cycle of the medicine development. And this is imposing us, we as Rwanda FDA, to build our capacity to provide oversight of these new and innovative products. So how do we strategize to actually reach this end? You know, you've seen us signing agreements or initiating partnerships with sister regulatory agencies in Africa and beyond Africa, on the American continent and in Europe. Probably what you did not see, or which you have started to see us doing, we've started to initiate partnerships with academic institutions, with universities in Europe, on the American continent, and even in Africa. Why are we doing this? It's because the first thing you have to do is to build the capacity of your staff to be able to have this science, which we're going to use to provide oversight of these new products and innovative ones and complex ones. So our approach, at least for Rwanda FDA, is to increase our capacity to be able to use science to make regulatory decisions. This is the first thing we are doing, and we are doing it through different agreements that we are securing with academic institutions. A second thing which we've done, we as Rwanda, through Rwanda FDA, is to review our policies. Because, and I know this is what is happening in so many African countries, when you look at the scope of what they do and in the policies that are guiding the work they do, you will see that most of the NRAs, national regulatory bodies, they are actually covering part of the medicine's life cycle, from clinical up to, post-clinical. But Rwanda FDA has a good mandate to provide oversight to the entire life cycle, from preclinical, clinical, and post-clinical. The reason why I'm saying this is because it's always a challenge to provide oversight or to regulate a product when you start being informed about that new product when it enters into the clinical phase. So our mandate has got this new scope to cover the entire medicines life cycle, the entire drug development cycle. And this is something which is going to allow us to be able to provide oversight of these innovative products. The reason why I'm saying this is because, you need to implement multiple strategies to be able to succeed. Because another thing which you have to do is to do what we call early engagement with academic and research institutions. You start collaborating with them, you get informed about what they do before the product is already ready to go into the clinical phase. And I'm happy to indicate that this is a lesson that we learned from the twinning cooperation we had with the European Union member state regulatory bodies, because most of them, they actually cover the entire life cycle. And this is something which we've got from them, and part of our staff have been capacitated from European agencies to be able to provide oversight of these regulatory oversight on these innovative products. But you also have to think about putting in place regulatory tools in a flexible way that can be adaptive, because you need to adapt to the new development. The pharmaceutical sector is very dynamic. You need to put in place flexible regulatory tools, but you also have to be supported but the policy level of the country to allow you to always, put in place regulations that are, adapted to the new development in the pharmaceutical sector. The reason why I'm saying this is because the way we put in place regulations at Rwanda FDA is very flexible and very easy. I'm comparing with some contexts where they have to go through different levels, different ministries, and sometimes in the parliament, which can actually take you to some steps backward. But here in Rwanda, whenever we need to adapt our regulations, it's a quick exercise which we do just to adapt and align the policy to practice. So this is what we do at Rwanda FDA. And last thing I want to mention, talking about policies, is what we've been doing at Rwanda FDA. We've put in place a strategy to regulate and provide oversight of new and innovative products. And here I'm talking about nanotechnology-based products. I'm talking about gene-based medicines, cell-based medicines. We already have tools that allow us to regulate these products. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I think the grounding in science and being adaptive are great, I think, anchor points for us. I just also wanted to get your reflection on what, on how AMA and reciprocity reliance frameworks can further enable this continental possibility in terms of complex products, because we're going to see companies invest in all countries. There is going to be a certain, phased expansion of regulatory capacity. So do you also see, aspects of regulatory and, reliance and reciprocity and AMA now being a reality, also being an enabler for complex products?
Yes, African Medicine Agency, AMA, just allow me to indicate that we abbreviate it as AMA, and European Medicine Agency, we abbreviate it as EMA, just to avoid this confusion. So AMA is now putting in place a system, but I'm happy to inform you that we've been looking into different systems that are existing on this globe that are regulating pharmaceutical products at continental level. And we've seen different systems that are being implemented. I can give you an example of what is happening at European Medicine Agency. They have two systems. One system is the system that is called the centralized scheme, where new products, complex ones, all these products that I have indicated, will be regulated centrally by European Medicine Agency. Another and second scheme is the decentralized one, where the rest of the products falls under the jurisdiction of national regulatory bodies. I'm not saying that this is the system that we will implement on the continent at AMA, but we are benchmarking from the best practice, and this is one of the best practices we've seen, which we will likely implement at AMA, indicating that all new products, innovative ones, including vaccines and biological products, may fall under the responsibility of African Medicine Agency. And the rest of the products may be regulated by national regulatory bodies. But one thing that is a requirement, and this is something which AMA will do, is to harmonize, the regulatory practices on the continent. The aim is actually to have like one regulatory body, but operating from different countries. And this is the first exercise that the African Medicine Agency will be doing to ensure that if a product is approved at that level, the approval goes in different countries, and the approval is adopted by different countries. How do you ensure that you have a system that is like one body but operating from different countries? You need to make sure that you build the capacity at the same level for all these different bodies that are operating from different countries. So capacity building is one of the key roles AMA will play again to ensure harmonization of practices and to be able to allow that they are applied, implemented in a harmonized way in different countries. So this is one of the approaches we are attempting, and we believe that we will be borrowing the best existing practices from different continents and adapt them to ours on the African continent.
Thank you, Prof. Mugisha, I'll turn to you. I want to shift to markets. We've had a lot of regulatory enablement. Markets are what keeps me up at night really is markets, right? So I want to talk to you and Menghis about that, but I'll start with you. We were talking yesterday about what is your target market? And often I see companies come and look at national market size and say how much they can do within that. Your vision was much broader, and which is what makes it sustainable. So could you reflect on how you are thinking about markets? What is your target market? And how did you define your target markets as you decided to set up, when you decided to set up in Africa?
First, Rwanda stands in the middle of Africa. So our target market is, first target market is the market around Rwanda. Freight cost in Africa is very high. Sometimes it's higher than the products itself. So why we sit in the center of Africa is to save the freight cost, the logistics cost for the products. So logistics from Rwanda to the countries around is short. Some countries like Tanzania, Kenya is empty containers to go back. So if we deliver from Rwanda, that means save much cost at the logistics level. If you import from India or China, you have to pay the logistic cost from the factory to the port, then the port to Tanzania or Mombasa. Then the most highest cost is from the Dar es Salaam or Mombasa to Rwanda or Kenya or Congo or the countries around. So if we can deliver goods directly from Rwanda, the center of Africa, both buyers and the factory will be benefit. This is first target. The second target is actually our mother company have many developed products, some used in different area of Africa, European. So we also can manufacture here to do a lot of export. This is our second level. So we have tried to make our medical management system adjust to this market.
And so a national market focus is not your goal, but you're looking at a continental market, a Pan-African focus is the basis for your business plan.
Actually, what we are looking at is, because we have already do this industry in China for more than 30 years, we have a lot of our old customer, old partner. So they also want us to deliver from Africa. It's not, we sit here and look at what market. It's according to our experience.
Excellent. So the growth in the past has been a large market footprint, and the focus for the African manufacturing is also the same large whiteboard of opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijay. That's very, very important framing, and I wanted, I get very concerned when I hear of, business plans that have a narrow market focus. In that, I think as we see this expanding, investor appetite to set up and serve all of African markets, it's very encouraging. Thank you very much. Menghis, I'll turn to you. Again, And as I think of this vision translating to access, you're not even just dealing with aggregation, you're dealing with market creation, because for the most part, that patient is not being served today. Right? So as we look ahead, how do we intensify both of these, market creation, market aggregation, to build longevity and sustainability in life into projects like yours?
Yeah, I think when we started in thinking about really which product or which disease state to go, we went back really to the basics. I mean, our own families and friends. I'm African, born and raised here, and like myself, many African in the diaspora, we keep getting regularly prescription from family members or friends or even neighbors that are in the continent that say, you know what, my wife had this, my brother has this, can you please send this? And you look at it and you say, okay, these are really not only highly expensive really monoclonal antibodies, but also really not easy to transport really medications. So if you look at all of that, of our own experience, the focus has been really more on oncology. So that's why we gravitated into oncology, and then in ophthalmology. So with that in mind, we have been working with the African Oncology Society, so that really not only to assess really where the gaps really are, where the unmet medical needs are, but we also really want to build whatever we are building in conjunction with them. So that, and that's giving us a competitive advantage because we are hearing directly from their own experience on how many patients and what's really the treatment really paradigm. If you go in oncology, I mean, you have to go, obviously, if you are in oncology, you have to go to major conferences like ASCO, ASH, etc. You see a lot really of African oncologists. And you talk to any of them, the most frustrating part is these are extremely bright oncologists that practice in the continent, even though they know really what standard of care, what all the novel agents really are. The most frustrating part for them is they cannot really prescribe any of them because they are not in the continent. So in fact, some of them openly say, well, we come here really more for personal growth, but also really for connection or so on. So focus on unmet medical need, and then selectively really focus on creating. I mean, I did marketing in my prior life, and as you know, if you are in development in R&D, 2 or 3 years really prior to launching of the product, you need to have a pre-launch strategy. And that really encompasses assessing the market, reimbursement really paradigm, all the insurance. So create demand. So that's really what we have been doing and will continue to do. So basically aggregate demand so that really we can serve the population.
Thank you, Menghis. I have about 5 minutes more for official close. We'll try to steal another 5 if we are nice, but I don't think I can push beyond that. I do have another question for Zeynep and Edward, but I want to open the floor to see if there are burning questions. I don't want to lose that opportunity. Yes, Prashant, I see a hand in the front and I see another hand there. Can we get...
Okay, thank you. My name's Nevin Bradford. I work with Labophar, which is a Rwandan pharmaceutical manufacturer. Just with regard to APIs, all of our APIs, with one exception, will be imported from India or China. The one exception is an opiate drug, which we will source from the UK. And the only way that that API manufacturer can be competitive is because it's operating in a controlled environment, which is opiates, and sells worldwide. All of our other APIs will come from India and mainly China. If we look at the sort of aggregate demand for APIs on the African continent, it'll be quite small, because the downstream, as it were, the finished dose manufacturing component of the pharma industry is still in its nascent phase. So my reflection is, that, of course, APIs are heavily capital intensive. They're also heavily volume driven. How can an African-based API manufacturer possibly compete on even a continental stage against what we might call the big players from India and China? You know, a couple of years ago, when I was working in a different company, an investor approached us. They were interested in manufacturing pharmaceutical-grade sugar in Uganda. And to help them, we collated the entire demand for pharmaceutical-grade sugar, which is not an API, but it's a value-added ingredient in many pharmaceutical preparations. And the entire demand for pharmaceutical-grade sugar from all of the companies in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya would equate to 2 weeks' output of the mooted facility. So just the demand is not there, the capacity to absorb locally manufactured APIs, which require a heavy capital investment and a heavy throughput, you know, volume, volume, volume. I'm thinking, should we be more thinking about parking, and I don't want to sound negative, but parking the API opportunity until we have a really large indigenous finished dose manufacturing capability on the continent, which could then absorb the output of those locally manufactured APIs. Thank you.
Jane, if you want to take that.
No, thank you so much for that. I'm definitely not qualified to take that question, but I wanted to make a reflection. I think what you're saying is obviously correct. I mean, this whole API dependency has been a major topic of discussion, but without a solution yet. I think it's not about parking, but having our expectations correct in that space. I don't think there's going to be a route to move API production everywhere. And you're talking about the aggregated Africa demand being too low. The demand in Africa is not aggregated. So in fact, we're talking about companies that are still acquiring for their even smaller scale APIs from those markets. So while we're looking at certain niche markets for certain products where the demand is really in Africa, where if we can move some of the processes with partners into Africa, I think we also need to create some financial capabilities for companies to access these APIs. I mean, one of the things that we're hearing, for example, frequently is the lack of access to foreign currency. So I think we should also be looking in, I don't think there is a short-term solution to sourcing APIs from the region at a large scale in the short term, but we could create perhaps solutions for sourcing APIs in a better way for Africa.
Excellent. Thank you, Zeynep. Yes, I think if we can get the mic to Prashant, I'm sorry, we won't be able to take more than one question. I'll request you to take it offline. Yeah, please.
I want to just remind people of something and get reactions maybe from Ed and Zeynep and anyone else who wants to comment. Given the huge manufacturing capacity expansions that are announced in the United States by the life sciences industry, the order books of the bio-equipment manufacturers, those who make the reactor, the tubing, the single-use, are filling up. They're filled up for the next 2 years because we're talking about $480 billion worth of capital investment happening in the US. So any of the manufacturers in other regions are going to struggle to get bioreactors, single-use, filters, like all of the things. Is there a strategy to address that? Because when I look at their order books, which I look at very closely, they are filled up for a long period of time. So the waiting times for a new plant to even order equipment could run into 3 to 5 years for some specific equipment.
So Prashant, I think that qualifies for an answer over tea and lunch, so we will leave it at that. But I think what's encouraging is we have a lot of those equipment suppliers in the room, and if anybody wants to raise their hand, please do. I see Sartorius raising their hand up there. And we're going to build in a phased, progressively expanding manner in Africa. I think as long as there is commitment from suppliers, it's not the largest market today, so we're going to engage suppliers as we go in the process, and I've seen that happen. So, moreover, lunch, I owe an apology this side for not looking this way before I took questions, but in the interest of time, while I'm getting stares from Ravi, I'll have to wrap this up. I can go on with this set of panelists for another hour, and I think to do justice, we should have done that. So, but anyway, quality over quantity, I think we've had a great set of perspectives on the fact that access to finance is here, both with upstream engagement from DFIs willing to come in and shape projects with you, but putting ingenuity to possible structures. We have companies who are now setting up in Africa to serve not just Africa, but global markets, but also in products where they got to go out there and create markets, but while doing so, really address clinical unmet needs, which are real. And providing comfort for all of that is the fact that government is here as a catalyst, regulators are here as enablers, and we can get this done together. So on that note, enjoy the rest of the day. You do have another session after this, so please don't take a long break. Take a quick bio break and get into the next discussion, but I'll request my panelists again to step up for a quick photograph before we wrap up.